Welcome to the Storytellers podcast. I'm your host, Peter Lewis. Welcome back to the Storytellers podcast, everyone, to season 2. Da-da-da-da! Last time you joined us on the Storytellers podcast, we had brought a conclusion to season 1, and that being for a couple different reasons. You know, as I had said, season 1 was experimental, and season 2, we have a lot of fun stuff coming at you now. So before we jump in, I just wanted to say thank you again for listening. Thank you again for being a part of this podcast journey. And I am pleased to say that I have a very special guest with me on today's podcast of The Storytellers. A little bit about this person. They are a fellow podcaster, a musician, singer-songwriter, a fellow nerd, a lover of Japan, one of the nicest humans I've ever met in my entire life, and probably the biggest fan of One Piece that I know. Please welcome Nick Hawthorne to the podcast, everybody.
What up?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm swell. How are you?
Really, really dandy. Thank you. So, welcome to the Storytellers, first off. And there's a specific reason I wanted to have you on this podcast. So back when I was driving around in my car, I was actually voxing you one day, and I was like, Nick, I'm starting a podcast. And I was like, what do I call it? And you're like, oh, you should call it The Storytellers. And I was like, that's a great idea. I think I will. And thus, here we are, The Storytellers podcast.
Oh, blessings.
Blessings.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you took it, but I was like, hey, this is a cool name. Use it.
Yes, sir. So one thing I like to do with bringing new guests on the show is I always like to get a little scoop on what they're about. So my first question I want to ask you, Nick, people don't really know a whole lot about you apart from those who know you and then maybe a little bit of the stuff that I've said. So my first question to you is this. If you were to be made into a character in a movie, video game, or something, what genre would it be? And what would be your biggest, most identifiable characteristic?
Oh, okay. Question about your question. For part 2, you said most of fun. Would that be like me into a character? What would be my character? Or can I like go outside of myself?
Whichever you prefer. Ideally, okay. Like, who would your character be? Like, what would be like, oh yeah, that's definitely a character based off of Nick. But then what would you want to be?
I would probably be in some kind of fantasy genre. One that's a little bit lighter than the darker ones. You know, not the type where the character at the end comes out with like missing limbs or like Frodo where he's scarred every year. He like has forever. Trauma every year. I like to have a little bit of comedy infused. It can have some of that, but a lot of lightheartedness too. And that probably answers what my character would be like. A little bit of the comedic relief or comic relief. Probably.
We all
cracking jokes at inappropriate times.
Yeah, I think you portrayed that fairly well when we were doing D&D together. Yeah, I think a year or two ago.
Yeah, I had horrible jokes at the wrong time.
Anything's better than Oliver, though, right?
Oh yeah. The dumb moose.
sorry Wesley, if you're listening. But anyway, so one thing that you and I have always bonded over is a love just for games and fantasy and all that. I know you've had your hands in quite a lot of different projects. You are someone who, anytime I think about them, I'm always thinking like, what is he up to now? What sort of stuff has been keeping you busy in quarantine and all that?
Yeah, what's been keeping me busy? Well, I have been doing a podcast, as you mentioned. Also working on an album, but it's not like a Nick Hawthorne album. It's a very experimental kind of compilation album, working with tons of other musicians and artists and combining stuff. And what else? planning trips for when quarantine ends, um, and when I can leave this country, and writing. I'm writing a comic, but we'll see if it actually happens. At least writing it for fun, as
Nice.
a hobby.
I
So,
love it. So when you had talked about podcasting, obviously we're on a
yeah.
podcast here, and
Hey.
you've been a huge wealth to that. If I can ask, what's your podcast? Like, tell us about your process for starting that. People who are listening right now, they've pretty much heard my process, but I would
Mm.
love to hear from a fellow podcaster. Like, what was that process like for you to get started?
Yeah. So let's see. I love the podcast medium in general. I drive for a living right now, so it's wonderful to um utilize and listen to. I love engaging and hearing people talk because I don't necessarily listen to music all day. I write music, so
Mm,
I need something probably different while I drive. Sometimes, so while I work, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I've really enjoyed the platform. I enjoy stories. I enjoy conversation. And so I've always wanted to do it for actually a few years now, but I've never really had the equipment or any of it to do that. The last few years that I've desired to do it, and the beginning of this year, it worked out. I got the equipment, and I was like, "Let's do this." So I launched starting quarantine, and so luckily, yeah, I just did some research on great ways to do it, and then just had held conversations and getting really cool information and stories with my subject matter. And it's called Desire of the Nations. I don't know if I said that, but
you didn't
that's what
know.
it is. Okay.
So what led, so obviously, me thinking of like my podcast, it's the Storytellers. I just want to
Yeah.
capture people who tell stories. What
Mm-hmm.
made you decide on the name Desire of the Nations for a podcast?
Yeah. So, well, to be frank, it is a name in the Bible for Jesus. He's the desire of the nations. And
Mm,
so I wanted to capture stories about what's going on in the nations with Jesus. So, bada boom, bada bang.
right. Yeah. But what's really cool and something I followed is I haven't listened to too many. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say
That's
that, but I
fine.
haven't listened to all of them yet. But what's been really cool is to see how quickly yours caught traction. Obviously, you and I are friends and we follow each other on
Yeah.
social media, but yours, it seems like to an extent, it almost blew up because you're having people come on that are like, people who it's like, wow, you actually got time with them. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of cool. So I'll share this as a tidbit for anybody wanting to do this. But kind of what helps was actually in college. We had to write down stuff that we wanted, and like at a class where we had to write down at the beginning of class, like people we like are inspired by.
Mm,
And the music I was a music major, so in the music industry, and then we had to write it down and put it in. That was like our paper, and then our professor came in the next day and he was like, "Hey, you're gonna do interviews with these people. Find out how to contact them and interview them." And everyone was like, "What?" He was like, "People love talking about themselves, so you're probably gonna get them to say yes." And I think without fail, everyone got a yes. So it was a real eye opener that like you can really just go for it and ask the person and find a way. Um, yeah. So there's that.
yeah, I always love your stories. You don't have to share it on this one, but at
Yeah.
some point, I would love to hear like your laptop story of the one you like went and traded, or you were like trying to get it repaired and you went to that shady person's house or whatever it was.
Oh no, it was I was trying to get so we're in the digital age and we were trying to get like um uh film transferred onto my computer. So like I had an actual like film instead of like a card where I can just plug into my Mac. I had like film that I needed tape deck to get onto my computer and I didn't have that technology because the world was moving on. It was crazy. I don't know. I can tell it,
that's
but
that's a
yeah,
story and a half.
it's
Um,
wild.
yeah, that's the God. I love those stories. So when you were talking about like the challenge that you had when you were in your class and all, they're like, "Yep, you're doing this."
Yeah.
Um, one thing that I've seen as well is I think people really do have a desire to discuss just things
Yes.
that are going on in life, whether it's projects or people they're connecting with. And one thing I've always known about you is you are very much a people person. You are someone who can really rally people together. You're someone who is very um, you're just very skilled when it comes to coaching and being understanding. And everyone always says like, yeah, Nick is one of the greatest people I know. um, what would you say are some of the pieces that one kind of helped you be that person? Like obviously it's just in your nature. What's your biggest influence that makes you really appreciate people? Like where did that value for people get instilled for you?
Um, yeah, as you said, it's probably some in my nature. But I guess it wasn't always there. I had to really learn to love people.
Mm,
If that makes sense. Um, yeah, I didn't for a while, actually. I'm actually an introvert by nature, so I like to recharge alone. And I
mm.
was pretty heavily into that, especially in high school. Um, once I get home, I'm not coming out. Um, Full hermit mode. No in between, hanging with people or hermit. But yeah, my heart was actually hardened towards people, and I over just getting over some pain in my life and hurt. I just gradually learned to love people. And I think maybe some of my own pain and hurt like helped me empathize with other people and understand where they could be coming from. Um, yeah, I don't know. Probably have to think. I'm probably going to be thinking about that question tonight as I go to bed. Like,
No, that's totally
so,
fine.
uh,
You're someone who, again, I respect with how you've learned to love people, and it's something that even being an influence of this podcast is a chance for me to step out and say I'm going to go talk to some people. But I was like, but I'm
yeah,
going to start with a friend because I know
yeah,
it's easy.
yeah.
So you had mentioned as well, and I think this is actually really cool. Just a question I had.
Hmm.
So when it comes to people who are more introverted,
Yeah.
obviously you've made a bridge and you are now doing like podcasting and you're like doing
Hmm.
like collective stuff with musicians. You're very much someone who gets exposed and gets around people.
Yeah.
And so how for someone who maybe is introverted, and
Yeah.
who's really seeking connection, especially like in COVID-19 season.
Yeah.
What was like a healthy first step you took to building connection with people?
Oh, what's a good healthy step? Good question. You're making me think. Um, mm, I think inviting people into what I love is a thing, which can take vulnerability on some stuff. Like it's like, oh, I gotta show people that I enjoy this and they could hate it. So like when you share your music with people, they're just like, okay. Well not yeah, the music that you enjoy. But it's finding commonality with someone. Like, oh, you like that too? Oh, let's do that together. And just being okay with making the first steps too. I think that's it. Like I had to get over being the one to initiate it and feel like I'm initiating it more. But yeah, just like, oh, I'm going out to eat to this cool restaurant. Let me bring people into that experience with me. And then that creates memories, it creates bonds. And I love to eat with people. That's probably the biggest thing. But
Most of the
biggest
blessings in
one.
life, most of your
Yeah.
blessings were those the food anointing, where it's like
Yes.
there's always free food.
It just happened on Thursday. They kept giving us free desserts at this restaurant.
I need to go
Try
find that
this,
restaurant.
try that.
I
Um,
mean, we can't talk about desserts and not mention Bell's bread, though, especially when it comes to
oh,
connection. So,
yeah.
little story on my part. I'll chime in here. Nick is a major lover of food, and he always finds
Hmm.
really good places. And there's a space that I think it was kind of like a two-part thing for you and I. Is we started playing D&D together as friends, and
Hmm.
we're like, oh, this is fun. And then that became talking about different cultures. And you and I are both huge just lovers of Japan and like the
Yeah,
Japanese culture and all that.
yeah.
And so there's this little cafe in Columbus, Ohio called Bell's Bread, and they have
Hmm.
like the best stuff ever.
Yeah. You, would you introduce me to the, I don't know what it's called. Subi en roll.
Oh,
It's a red bean roll.
the Subu on roll. Yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
that's it. Okay.
Yeah. And then
uh,
you introduced me to the Earl Grey macaroons, which I
oh
had never
yeah.
had.
Oh, those are so good.
I love
Yeah.
sugar and sweets.
Yeah. Same.
But you know, on that topic of Japan as well, you know, you had actually sent me a really cool podcast that you had listened to.
Yeah.
What was that podcast you sent me?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I just searched up Japan and like missions because it's similar to like what I podcast about. I'm like, I wonder if other people are talking about this stuff. And so I don't really know anyone in Japan right now. So I want to hear what other people are saying. And so I just found an episode and I downloaded it. So I don't know the name of it.
It
I'm
was so good.
sorry.
So no, it's fine. I'll have to go find it again, and I can always like post it in the comments after
Yeah.
posting this episode. But what I loved about it was, you know, it really hits this balance of what it's like to be a missionary, and I know that's something you're super passionate about.
Yeah.
There's some of that's bubbling up in me too. Just as time goes on, I really have a desire to go and connect with people. You know, me also being a Christian, I want to share the gospel of Jesus with them.
Yeah.
Um, and that being said too, it's always really cool to see the experience of what it's like to come in as an outcast. Like, you know, you come in,
Yeah.
you're not part of the culture. And the podcast you sent me, they had talked about where, you know, sometimes the biggest challenge when ministering to people who want to take that step is, well, I don't really want to step away from my culture. um, I think even here in America, I mean, that's a big part of when we make that choice. It's people aren't always behind it, and they're always like, "Oh, you're one of those guys. Cool. That's interesting."
Yeah.
But when it comes to you, you know, why is Japan important to you? Like, I know we've talked a little bit about how I just love like the culture and the food and stuff, but
Hmm.
um, what about Japan excites you? Would you say?
Oh, geez. What about Japan? That's a good question. I think well, it first really got on my map initially is I went to a high school that was very small. It was a private school, but there's a ton of foreign exchange students comparatively. It's not a ton because I graduated with like 44 kids, but there's a statistically, percentage wise, there's a ton of foreign exchange students. And but yeah, so one of them was a Japanese student, and any of the cultures that came in I got really fascinated with. I was like, tell me about everything. um so that was on my radar too. And then you mentioned earlier One Piece. Like, I really got into manga, a lot of it. um and I decided to get into that because I'm just a nerd, as you said, and love fantasy. And I really like how Japan does comics opposed to here in the US.
Mm,
They tell the story and then it's the story. Like here we have like Batman, but there's no set continuity. Can I don't know. Yeah. Anyways,
continuity.
there it is. I was
Okay.
like, I don't think that's a word. But it's like different writers like every year, every 2 years, and they just rehash the same old stories. But there they complete the story. And there's a lot of great cool values and cool ideas in that, and so that got me just interested in general into their culture, um in just their nerd culture really. And then just loving their food, Bell's bread, just piques my interest more and more. And like, and I like to travel in general, so I really love it.
Yeah.
As much as I've learned in Instagram photos, you know.
Do it for the gram. Do you have, I mean, you have traveled some for sure. You know, I've
Yeah.
heard stories and seen pictures. In the
Yeah.
past couple years, was there an experience that you did traveling that you really enjoyed as of recent?
Not as of recent because we've been in quarantine.
Yeah.
But no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I've enjoyed all of them.
Is there one that stuck out as like, wow, like I'll never forget that moment? Or like, did you have any of
like a
those?
moment from the travels.
Yeah, like it's just any of the trips you've been on last, we'll say 5 years or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think this is a really weird story, but I can tell it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think this was just it was like a full circle moment. So, uh, kind of be quick. Didn't I've always wanted to travel since I was probably like really, really wanted to travel outside the country. Since I was probably like a senior in high school, I was like dreaming up trips in my mind. But I don't think I left the country till I was like 25, outside of Canada. I went when I was younger, like 8 or 9 or 10 or something in there. But anyways, and I've wanted to, and I've had opportunities and open doors to, but there's this thing in me that like I felt like I couldn't leave until I released music for some reason.
Hmm.
And I was like, I don't feel like I can go. So I turned them down. Also, my jobs made me turn them down because I never had enough vacation days. So there's that too. But
Yeah.
there's always that inkling like, man, I feel like I shouldn't go until I have music out. And I don't know why. So then I finally released an album. And like, how many months later? Like 4 months later, I think I went to like Honduras, and so we were there, and it was an awesome trip. And then one of our last days there, we got a text from one of the cities we visited, and someone just put my music on the radio in Honduras, and I was like, "What the heck?" um,
With no
what?
permission.
No, they didn't ask permission. No, but I didn't care because it's kind of cool. So I was like, "What?" But
Uh,
it's kind of like this cool full circle moment. Like, oh, I feel like I'm not supposed to go to I release an album. Then my first trip overseas, uh my music gets put on like the radio, and I'm like, what the heck is this?
that's
um
nuts. Oh my gosh.
that was definitely wild. um
Wow, wow, wow. Um, so that being said, I'm actually going to save one question for the end, and I think it's
okay.
it's a really good question that I think you'll have some really good advice to dig into.
Mm,
Before we get into that, let's kind of break this into two pieces.
okay.
So, traveling internationally,
Yes.
I was one of the lucky individuals who, for some reason, when I came home from my honeymoon with Sierra, I was flagged, and they're like, "Oh, we need to take you through security." And some people have heard this before, but I went to check in, like how you check in on the terminal when you get back through customs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I went and I put in my name, and it was like, "Are you with family?" And I was like, "Oh, well, we've been married like 4 days or something like that." So it's like, "Yeah, we're family." And so I put it in, and it's like, "Please go see security." And I got like an X on my thing, and I was like, "Ah, I think I did it wrong. Let me do it by myself." And so then I redid it, and then it's like, "Go see security now." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I went up to the security, and the guy like grabs my ticket, and he's just looking at it, looks at me, looking at it, looks at me, types in the computer, looks at me again, and he's like, "Okay, have a nice day." I was
Oh.
like, "Excuse me, sir. I would love to know why you stopped me." And he was like, "Oh, well, there's a wanted felon with your same description and first, middle, and last name
Oh.
passing through this area right now, and we thought you were him."
Oh.
I'm like, "Wow, I'm glad I'm not." But that has always led to me having wonderful security experiences with TSA. I often get pat down and randomly, quote unquote, I'm making quote fingers, randomly selected. Um, but what's some advice that you have? You've traveled and you've been a radio star in other countries,
Oh yeah.
apparently.
Oh my gosh. No.
What would you say for people who want to travel? I guess for part one, before traveling, what's something you wish you knew before going to a new country for the first time?
Well, I think I got lucky with my first time because I didn't plan the trip and I had nothing to do with that. I just was along for the ride. So I think I got really lucky. I feel like if I would advise someone though for my probably first trip where I did plan, um, something learning the best ways to exchange money or pay for things.
Mm.
Probably because a lot of times you lose money in exchanging cash, and then looking into it's not always wise to use a credit card overseas, but in the nice places, use one that has no international fees. Um, so um, that's I don't know, it's more of a practical thing, but
Hey, practical is good for some people. Some people need to
yeah,
hear that.
just research into that, like transferring money with the least fees, so you don't end up just losing money. Because I think they charged you like they charged in the UK like anywhere you went, except for I guess post offices. So um,
So on the more of kind of what we've been chatting about is like the cultural side.
yeah.
What would you say, like if you were going to a country? what do you
Mm-hmm.
do to prepare? Like, do you print off things? Do you go research stuff? Like, I remember when I went to London, the first thing I did was download slang. So I knew slacks meant trousers and pants meant underwear. So I didn't say, like, hey, where are your pants? And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, you're looking in the wrong section. What do you do to prepare if you're ever going international?
Um, yeah, I researched a lot and asked questions. Luckily, where I've had friends who have been to those places so far before. And so I just ask them questions about the culture, so I don't do anything crazy. Um, one time I gave someone a thumbs up, and someone's like, "Oh my gosh, that's offensive here," but they were just pulling my leg. They were just trying to freak me out. Um, but it does get you thinking, like, "Oh no." And so yeah, just research that. Research where you're going, where you're staying, and how transport works. Probably transport. Um, because that can get really confusing. But yeah, and then especially if you're going somewhere with um, a language barrier, learning the basics of
Yeah.
like, "Hi, thank you. Where's the bathroom?" Like,
The most important things. Yes, no, bathroom, please.
yeah.
Awesome. So, before we jump into the last segment, we're going to take a quick break and I'm going to come back and I'm going to have one final question for Nick before we wrap up this episode. So, we will be back with you in just a moment. Let's take five. Welcome to 5 Minutes with the Host. In this new segment, this is a time for us to sit down together and share some stories, answer some questions, and for me to keep you guys up to date on all the exciting stuff happening in the world of the storytellers. So, this episode with Nick, he is so much fun to chat with. And while we've been talking about travel and some other stuff like that, I thought a really good way to kick off this new segment would be to tell a really funny story of mine, especially when it comes to international travel. So, what had happened is this was back in the year of 2015, and this was my first time getting ready to head over to Europe on a trip to London. Then we were traveling with some friends. We had a busy agenda while we were heading there, and we were still kind of working things out, figuring out what would work best. So I decided to share a room with a buddy of mine. And now, granted, him and I were not the closest friends at this time, but we at least had some relationship with each other where we're like, yeah, we can share a room. That shouldn't be no problem. So we went through, did the booking, and ended up getting what was called a standard double. We're like, yeah, double. It's two beds. It's double the space. And, we were ready to go. And our hotel was fully booked, so this was one of the last rooms, but we were super lucky that this room was exactly what we needed. Two beds in one room that we could share for the 7 or 8 days we were in London. So we jump on our flights, we both arrive same day, different times, and eventually sync up at the airport and we go to Earl's Court, which is where the hotel we were staying at is. And it's a beautiful area of kind of nearby London, and the experience of going there. I mean, it was just a blast. If you were going to travel for the first time internationally, I'd highly recommend either learning the language or going somewhere that speaks English. And so we figured, yeah, England, easy start for us. So while we were there, we went to go check into our hotel, and we went up to the front desk, and the lady behind the counter gave us a bit of a weird look when we were asking about our room. And she said, "Okay, well, here are your keys. It's up at the top of the stairs." So, we meander upstairs all excited and like, "Yeah, this will be fun. We'll get to know each other. We'll share a room and yeah, we'll just become close friends on this trip." So we unlock the door, we push it open, and voila, one bed. And we're like, "Hmm." And, my buddy looks over at me and says, "You checked this, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, standard double. That's the thing." Because there was a twin and a double. And I was like, "Oh, a twin. That means, twin size bed. That's too small." What I misunderstood was the definition of a double, meaning that what it translates to is two men could very tightly fit in this bed together. And so that ended up becoming the reality. During the time we were traveling, we ended up going during Wimbledon, which is the huge, huge tennis competition that happens there. And so every single hotel in the area was booked, and we really did not have any other options. We went and we asked and said, "Hey, is there anything you can do? Can you pull some strings for us? If we pay extra, can you shift us to a different room?" And she said, "Sorry, this hotel is fully booked. You guys have that last room." So we decided that we were just going to become really good best friends on that trip. And granted, we're still friends, but that's kind of the weird way to make a friendship is to share a bed for a week in another country. But yeah, all in all, it was a pretty fun experience. We're still friends today, which is great, and thankfully we have not had to share a bed since. And yeah, good travel stories always come in. I will say though that that definitely was a very humbling experience to be able to share a very small bed with another person. We had a pillow line in the middle, so we didn't cross borders or anything like that, but it was a fun time. So if you ever get the chance to go to travel internationally, one, I'd recommend understanding what it means when you go to book your hotel, especially if you need multiple beds in that room. Two, learn the language. And three, travel with some friends. I know some people who travel alone, but I always say, hey, if you're going somewhere, why not bring someone with you? But yes, that's the story of this time. I hope you guys have enjoying the episode so far. We will be back with Nick in just a moment here. So thank you again for this, tuning in and listening to 5 Minutes with your host. And we will see you another time again soon. Welcome back, everyone, to the ending of our wonderful episode here with Mr. Nick Hawthorne. So, Nick, you've been so much fun to talk to, and thank you again for coming on and just kicking off this season two with me. I'm excited for the people I'm going to be meeting with, and honestly, it's been an honor to have you on here. There's something you said earlier, and I think
Mm-hmm.
this is where I'd really, really love to hear you expound on it. So this is, you can take as long as you want to do this, but
Cool.
you had said, I didn't feel like I was supposed to travel until I released music.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to anyone who's doing anything, whether it's I feel like I want to get a new job, I feel like I want to travel, I feel like I want to start a band,
Yeah.
people always have those preparatory things they want in place, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's like, yeah, that's totally practical, do that. But then other
Yeah.
times it's kind of like, don't worry about that, just go.
Mm-hmm.
With your experience, if you came across someone who is in a similar situation to you, and maybe they have something they want to do but they have these other pieces they want to do before, what
Yeah.
advice would you want that person to know?
Um, yeah, I would say so if they had pieces before doing the thing. Yeah, then I would say go for the pieces. Follow that for sure. Even if it doesn't always make sense, like releasing an album so that I can travel doesn't really make sense on paper. Um, I'll be first to admit it, and I would be first to admit that I don't think people will necessarily like. Well, I didn't really explain myself ever when I turn people down, so you don't necessarily have to. But I think if I did, it wouldn't make sense to others. And that's okay. I think that's okay if it doesn't always like make the exact logical step sense. Sentences. Yay. I'm like, I don't know that grammar. Anyways, but this is where I write things down. This is why I'm a writer because I get flabbergasted. Anyways, so yeah, I would say follow it. I mean, for me, uh, yeah, it felt like an obedience thing for me, not to go. Like as I said, I have a podcast with Jesus, so I follow Jesus, and he speaks. What so, and I felt like that was him speaking to me.
Mm.
And it's yeah, it just to me a lot of times it just feels like this knowing. You know what I'm talking about? It's just like, oh, like I just know this. Like you, it makes no sense, but I just know it. I don't know why, but I know it. And so that's kind of like what it was like for me. And so if you feel those same things, I would stick with it. Like, um, trust that. If you have these A, B, and C's before you can get to D, I would do that. I don't know. Is that make sense?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
great. Really, I think what you're getting at is, sometimes people get like a gut check, or in our
Yeah.
case, you follow the unction of Jesus. That's
Yeah.
that's kind of what you and I are in the same boat with that.
Yeah.
Um, but really, I think what you're getting at is like, check those unctions. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, like don't do that until that's in place.
Yeah.
And but then other cases, sometimes it's like, man, I really want to do this, but then other times it's almost backwards, where it's like, no, you need to do that hard one or that risky one first.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, because I know most of my time when I have that knowing and I'm just like, no, no, and then I go against it, and hindsight is 2020. Anyways, so yeah, and then as what you're saying with the hard stuff and like not wanting to do the hard stuff first, if that is the thing, because I think that is the case a lot of times. I think it's still choosing it anyways. I've learned to not obey fear. So if like I'm afraid of doing the hard stuff and I recognize that me ignoring it is fear, then I'm like, oh heck no. And then I go disobey it because I don't want to obey fear. It like kills passion, it kills love. And so yeah, disobey fear, do the hard things.
Fear kills passion. Good wise words.
Yeah, it does. So
Man, this has been awesome. Nick, thank you so much just for coming on, being a part of this. I'm
yeah.
super honored to be able to call you a friend and just a fellow worker, whether it's, collaborating over podcasts, or,
Yeah.
even talking about the gospel that you and I are both working to see come true.
Hmm.
I have immense respect for you, and, having you on here is a big treat to not only me, but to our listeners as well.
Yeah.
So that is all we have for this episode of the Storytellers podcast. Nick, before we part, where can people listen to you, and what kind of things can people do if they want to stay engaged with you, if they want to hear more, or if they want to listen to your podcast or hear your music? Where can they find some of those things?
Yeah. So you can find my music anywhere online. So Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, etc. Under Nick Hawthorne. If you type in my name, you'll find it. I'm pretty sure. And if you do the same in a podcast app, you'll probably find it. Or you just look up the podcast Desire of the Nations, and that's where you listen to that and music everywhere else. Yeah, Instagram at Nick J Hawthorne. Um, if you want to like contact me that way, just send me a message, I guess. Yeah,
Slide into your DMs. No,
yeah, politely,
politely,
respectfully,
respectfully, politely. Awesome.
not creepily.
Yes, not creepily, please.
Yes.
There's enough creepers already.
Mhm.
All righty, good sir. Well, always a pleasure to talk to you, and
Yeah.
I will catch you around. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Peter.
Yeah, and happy storytelling, everybody. Take care. Thanks for listening. Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Storytellers podcast. If you've enjoyed the podcast so far, head on over to anchor.fm/thestorytellers, where you can listen to more episodes as well as support the podcast. The Storytellers is available on most streaming platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many others as well. If you want to stay up to date and see all announcements on upcoming Storytellers episodes, head on over to Instagram and follow me at the handle I am P. Lewis. Thanks again for listening.